Johnny Carson had hosted The Tonight Show for thousands of nights. Thousands of monologues, celebrity interviews, sketches that became part of American culture. He'd perfected the rhythm, the timing, the ability to keep a show moving no matter what happened. Technical difficulties? He'd improvise. Awkward guests? He'd rescue them. Dead silence? He'd fill it with a joke that would be quoted for decades. But that night, something happened that Johnny Carson couldn't fix with humor. Something that stopped the machinery of late-night television completely. Something that reminded everyone watching that beneath the jokes and the carefully timed punchlines, there was a man who understood pain. The studio audience had filed in like they always did. Excited. Chattering. Ready to laugh. The warm glow of the NBC studio lights. Doc Severinsen and the band running through their warm-up. Ed McMahon reviewing his cue cards at his desk. Everything running like clockwork. This was the most reliable show in American television. 30 years of consistency. I in the front row, an older man sat quietly. Maybe 65. Maybe older. Hard to tell. He wore a jacket that had clearly been carefully maintained but showed its age. Military patches on the shoulders. Faded unit insignias. The kind of jacket a man wears when it's the most important thing he owns. His hands were folded in his lap. Steady. Patient. He wasn't smiling like the people around him. Wasn't excited. Just present. The audience coordinators had noticed him during seating. Asked if he was okay. He'd nodded once. Just here to see Johnny, he'd said. Nothing more. They'd left him alone. The show started. The familiar theme music. Ed's booming voice. Here's Johnny! The curtain parted. Johnny Carson walked out to thunderous applause, that easy smile, that perfect wave. Master of the stage. King of late night. The monologue began. Political jokes. Commentary on the day's news. A bit about California weather. The audience laughed in all the right places. Johnny was in perfect form. Relaxed. Confident. Every line landing exactly as intended. About 6 minutes into the monologue, Johnny's eyes swept the audience. Standard practice. Connect with the people. Make eye contact. Make them feel part of the show. That's when he saw the man in the front row. The older man who wasn't laughing. Who wasn't smiling. Who was just sitting there with his hands folded, looking at Johnny with an expression that wasn't hostile but wasn't friendly either. Just present. Bearing witness. Johnny's rhythm didn't break. But something registered. A flicker of recognition. Not of the man himself. Of what the man represented. The jacket. The patches. The stillness. He finished the joke he was telling. Got his laugh. Then he did something unusual. He paused. Let the laughter die down completely. And he looked directly at the man in the front row. Sir? Johnny said, his voice different now. Quieter. More direct. You served? The studio went quiet. This wasn't part of the show. This wasn't planned. The audience coordinators looked at each other nervously. The producers in the control room leaned closer to their monitors. What was Carson doing? The man stood up slowly. Like it hurt. Like standing required effort. Yes, sir, he said. His voice was rough. Underused. But steady. Vietnam? Johnny asked. 2 tours. The studio was completely silent now. Even the band had stopped their ambient playing. Doc Severinsen watched from his position, trumpet lowered. Ed McMahon had put down his coffee mug. Johnny set his note cards on the desk. Carefully. Deliberately. Like he was making a decision in real time that the network wasn't going to like but that had to be made anyway. What's your name? Robert. Robert Chin. Robert, Johnny repeated. Thank you for your service. Robert nodded once. Sharp. Military precision still there after all these years. Appreciate that, Mr. Carson. Johnny took a step forward. Away from his desk. Away from his notes. Away from the safety of the planned show. Is there something you'd like to say? Robert looked down at his hands for a moment. Then back up at Johnny. And he said 5 words. They're still over there, Johnny. Carson stopped mid-monologue. The entire studio froze. The silence was absolute. 3 seconds. 5 seconds. An eternity in live television. Johnny's face changed. The performer disappeared. The smile faded. What replaced it was something raw. Something real. Recognition. Understanding. Grief. I know, Johnny said quietly. So quietly the microphones barely caught it. I know they are. Robert's eyes were wet, but he wasn't crying. 58,000 names on a wall. But there's more than that over there. There's the ones who came back but left pieces of themselves behind. There's the ones who made it home but can't stop seeing what they saw. There's the families who got folded flags instead of their sons. Johnny walked to the edge of the stage. The producers were probably screaming in his earpiece. They had a show to do. Commercial breaks to hit. A schedule to maintain. But Johnny reached up and took out his earpiece. Set it on the desk. And walked down the stairs into the audience. The camera operators scrambled. This wasn't blocked. This wasn't rehearsed. But they followed. Because they understood instinctively that whatever was happening mattered more than the format. Johnny stood in front of Robert. Eye level now. 2 men. No performance. No artifice. Just presence. Tell me about them, Johnny said. Not a command. An invitation. Robert's voice cracked. My unit. My brothers. We lost 17 men in a week. January 1968. Tet Offensive. I carried 3 of them myself. Boys. Not men. Boys. 19. 20. 21. They believed they were fighting for something that mattered. He pulled something from his jacket pocket. A photograph. Worn. Creased from being handled for years. He held it out to Johnny. Johnny took it carefully. Looked at it. A group of young soldiers. Smiling. Muddy. Exhausted. Alive. That's Danny, Robert said, pointing. And that's Marcus. And Tommy. And Jesse. All gone. All still over there. In the ground. In our heads. In our dreams. Backstage, he made a choice no producer would have ever allowed. Johnny looked at the photograph for a long moment. Then he looked at the camera. Directly into the lens. Speaking to millions of people across America. We're going to take a moment here. Not a commercial. Just a moment. Because Robert came here tonight to remind us of something we shouldn't forget. And I think we need to listen. The control room was in chaos. The network executives were making calls. They had sponsors. They had a format. They had contracts. But Johnny Carson had made his decision. And Johnny Carson was the Tonight Show. He turned back to Robert. How many years has it been? 15, Robert said. 15 years since I came home. But I never really came home. Part of me is still in that jungle. Part of me is still carrying Danny through the mud. Part of me is still hearing Marcus call for his mother. The audience was crying. Not the polite tears of a touching moment. Deep, gut-wrenching sobs. Strangers holding hands. People who'd come to laugh finding themselves confronted with something they'd been avoiding. Johnny's own eyes were wet. What do you need, Robert? What can I do? Just remember them, Robert said. Don't let them become statistics. Don't let them be numbers on a wall. They were people. They had lives. They had futures. And they gave it all up because someone told them it mattered. Johnny nodded slowly. Then he did something that broke every rule of television. He hugged Robert. Right there. On camera. In front of millions. The old soldier and the talk show host. Holding each other while the country watched. When they separated, Johnny's voice was thick. Doc, He called to the band. Can you play something? Something slow. Something that honors what we've just heard. Doc Severinsen, who'd served in World War II, understood immediately. He started playing taps. Just him. Just his trumpet. The mournful notes filled the studio. Robert stood at attention. Instinct. Muscle memory. Johnny stood beside him. Hand over his heart. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. When the last note faded, when the silence returned, Johnny spoke directly to the camera again. If you're watching this and you served, we see you. If you lost someone, we remember them. If you're still carrying it, you're not alone. Robert came here tonight to make sure we don't forget. So we won't. He turned to Ed McMahon, who was openly crying now. Ed, you served too. Korea, right? Ed nodded. Couldn't speak. Just nodded. Come down here. Johnny said. Ed walked down. Stood with Johnny and Robert. 3 men. 3 wars. 3 generations of American conflict. The camera held on them. No words. Just presence. The audience began to stand. One by one. Not applauding. Just standing. Bearing witness. A standing acknowledgement that this moment was bigger than entertainment. But this was the moment no one in the studio, nor anyone at home, ever saw coming. From the audience, more people stood. And as they stood, they spoke. Navy. USS Hornet. 1945. An old man in the back. Army. Germany. 1943. A woman in the middle. Marines. Beirut. 1983. A younger man near the front. They kept coming. One after another. Names. Units. Years. A litany of service. A roll call of sacrifice. Johnny stood there. Taking it in. Holding space. Not performing. Not hosting. Just witnessing. Ed stood beside him, hand on his heart. Robert stood tall, tears streaming down his face, finally not alone. The show went 15 minutes over. The network ate the cost. The sponsors complained. But the switchboard lit up with 10,000 calls. People thanking them. People sharing their own stories. People saying they'd called family members they'd been avoiding. People saying they'd finally told someone about what they'd been carrying. When the show finally went to commercial, Johnny didn't return to his desk. He stayed with Robert. Talked quietly. Got his information. Made calls right there on the stage to Veterans Services. Connected Robert with counselors. With support groups. With resources he'd been too proud or too broken to seek himself. The photograph Robert had shown Johnny, the one with Danny and Marcus and Tommy and Jesse, Johnny asked if he could keep it. Just for a while. Robert hesitated. That photo was all he had left of them. But he trusted Johnny. Handed it over. Johnny had it framed. Not in his office where guests would see it. On the set. Right there on his desk. Every show. Every night. For the rest of his tenure. A reminder that beneath the jokes and the celebrity interviews, there were real people with real pain. And sometimes the most important thing a host could do was stop hosting. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. Robert became a regular guest. Not on camera. But in the audience. Johnny's staff had instructions. Robert Chin gets a seat whenever he wants one. Front row. No questions asked? And several times a year, Johnny would see him there and pause. Just for a moment. Acknowledge him. A nod. A small salute. A reminder that some things matter more than the show. Years later, when Johnny retired, he gave the photograph back to Robert. But he'd had copies made. Sent them to the families of Danny, Marcus, Tommy, and Jesse. Along with a note. Your son mattered. He's not forgotten. Robert made sure of that. The 5 words, "They're still over there, Johnny," became a rallying cry. Veterans groups used it. Support organizations adopted it. A reminder that war doesn't end when the fighting stops. It lives in the men and women who carry it home. Johnny Carson never spoke about that night in interviews. Never tried to make it part of his legacy. But everyone who was there, the crew, the audience, Robert, carried it with them. A reminder that the bravest thing you can do on television isn't make people laugh. It's make them remember. Robert Chin passed away in 2004. His obituary mentioned that night. Mentioned Johnny. Mentioned that for one moment, on national television, 58,000 names became real again. Became people. Became brothers. And somewhere, in the space between entertainment and witness, Johnny Carson proved that late-night television could hold more than jokes. It could hold grief. It could hold honor. It could hold the weight of men who came home but never really came home. 5 words. They're still over there, Johnny. And they always will be.